What if the check engine light for your brain wasn't just a feeling of exhaustion, but something you could actually see? Most of us treat burnout and stress as invisible enemies, but neuroscience is proving that these conditions leave physical fingerprints on our neural pathways, patterns that can be mapped, measured, and sometimes even reversed. Today, we explore the revolutionary world of brain mapping and neurofeedback. We're moving past the guesswork of standard interviews and looking directly at the electrical squiggles that tell the true story of our mental health. Our guest today explains how a non-invasive scan can act as a mirror, revealing why your memory might be fading, why your child is struggling in school, or why a life of chronic stress has left your brain caught in an unhealthy loop. Whether you're a caregiver, battling the high cortisol of burnout, or someone worried about the signs of cognitive decline, this episode is for you. It offers a roadmap for resilience. Discover how technology like photobiomodulation and heart rate variability are turning the tide on neuroinflammation, helping us move from simply surviving to building a truly healthier mind. Welcome to Fading Memories, your source for all things dementia caregiving. I'm your host, Jen Fink, and I have had 3 generations of loved ones with dementia, and I'm here to share the knowledge I've gained with you. Welcome back, Fading Memories listeners. I always appreciate your time and attention. Today we're talking about stress, burnout, and how we can use neurofeedback to regain some of our brain health. With me today is Santiago Brand. He is an international brain mapping and neurofeedback expert who has worked in 26 different countries. He helps individuals and professionals understand how stress, burnout, and cognitive overload affect the brain and how brain mapping can guide better mental resilience and long-term brain health. With over 17 years of experience, he translates neuroscience into simple, practical tools anyone can use to support a healthier mind. So thanks for joining me all the way from Singapore.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really, really excited.
Thank you so much. So why don't you give the listeners your background and explain a little bit about brain mapping, and then I'll let you run off with how we can fix stress and burnout.
Well, I am by training, by education and training, I'm a sport and clinical psychologist. I started my career with sports psychology. Once I graduated with my BA in the US, I decided to pursue sports psychology because my dad is a former professional soccer player, and sports has always been a part of my life, one way or the other. So I've always been an active person. I love exercising. I love working out. I love playing sports. And it made sense to go into sports psychology because I felt quite passionate about it. And when I was doing my internship, I started working with figure skating. And during that first week, one of the figure skaters I was working with attempted suicide.
Oh dear.
And this was a 17-year-old young man who attempted suicide after his girlfriend, who is also a figure skater, broke up with him.
Oh dear.
And right there and then, I understood that I needed to learn about clinical psychology because sports psychology alone was not going to help me. And therefore, when I finished my graduate studies in sport psychology, I went and did my graduate studies in clinical psychology, and that complemented things very well. But I was not fully satisfied with just doing in paper and pencil testing and interviews because I felt very strongly that that was not providing a window into the mind and the brain. And I always felt that there had to be a more objective way of looking at this. And that got me into this journey of searching for something more tangible. And coincidentally, we had a gentleman when I was working for the Colombian Olympic Committee. When I was working as a sports psychologist, they invited this gentleman, and the workshop was about neurofeedback, brain mapping, and biofeedback. And I thought, well, this is really interesting. Let's sign up. And the very first day he takes out the equipment, he starts measuring brain waves, and he starts teaching us how to control our brain waves, to control feedback, and how we could use our breath work to lower anxiety. And that was love at first sight. That was the answer to my prayers. Right there and then, I found what I was looking for, and I knew that that's what I wanted to do long term. And if you fast forward 17 years later, here we are. And it's been a wonderful career, in which now the technology is much better. So it's very exciting because now we have more optimal ways, more scientific ways, but more objective ways of looking at the brain. So now the way I see it, there's no excuse for us to not understand phenomena. We may not know everything about the brain because, of course, we don't, but we have a cost efficient way of looking at the brain, which is the brain mapping, and a cost efficient way of training the brain, which is the neurofeedback and the photobiomodulation and other neuromodulation interventions. And I'm very excited because the more I look at brain maps, the more I can understand people. And one of the things I really love about what I do the most is made me more compassionate for my fellow human beings. When somebody's behaving in a certain way, it's very easy to very quickly judge them.
Mm-hmm.
But as I look at their brain, I can understand their struggles, and that makes me more sensitive to why people do certain things.
That makes sense. I've learned through my couple of decades of living with my mom with Alzheimer's and doing the show that dementia behaviors are always a way of trying to communicate a need. They just don't have the language skills anymore. So how does brain mapping work, and what does it tell us?
Well, the first thing that I want the audience to understand is that brain mapping is a non-invasive process. It doesn't
Sounds
involve
good.
drinking anything or putting anything into the brain, right? It's a very comfortable process where you can wear a cap that looks much like a shower cap. And the cap has holes, which we call sensors, because they sense the electrical activity of the brain. So we put a little bit of gel, looks like a little bit of a Play-Doh, but it's a more liquid form. And we put it into the sensors. So that helps amplify the signal that's coming from the brain. And then we have you look into the screen, and in front of the screen, we can show you brainwaves. So for anybody who's ever seen an EEG, an electroencephalogram, either on a drama show or the news, you will see the squiggly lines. And that's what we use as the baseline. This squiggly lines is your brain talking to us. So when I'm doing a brain map on anybody, I'm establishing a communication with that brain. And I'm asking that brain to tell me what it needs. And therefore, when we do a brain map for you, we can tell you the why. Why is my memory fading? Is it really the possibility that it is Alzheimer's, or is it normal aging? Why is my child flunking out of school? Why am I feeling depressed? Why is my spouse so stubborn? Now, basically, we can tap into that and provide you with the why. And when we look at it, the brain will speak to us in terms of patterns. So we now know what an ideal brain pattern looks like. And this is individual. This is not a global universal thing. Every brain is unique, just like your DNA or your fingerprints. So your brain is unique, and we compare you to you. And when we look at that, we will see patterns. The brain starts showing patterns. It's the way of the brain waving the arms and going, hey, pay attention to this. So when we see it and we see that dysregulation, I will be able to tell you, based on your brainwave patterns, I think we need to work on your sleep. Your brain is sort of showing me that you tend to, space out from time to time. And the way I do it is I go blind. I don't ask the individual to tell me anything but their name, gender, and age. That's all the information I get for you initially. And then as I'm doing the brain map live, as I'm looking at your brainwave activity, I'm telling you what your brain is telling me. So when I do this, I tell people, don't shoot the messenger. It's your brain telling me. I'm just relaying the info to you. And then people have a better understanding. So
Makes sense.
now they go, oh my gosh, so I'm not crazy. Because that's the number one thing that goes through most people's minds. Am I crazy? Am I losing it? Am I unfixable? And I will tell them, well, it is really in your head, but you're not doing this because you're a bad person. You're doing it because your brain it's caught up in a pattern that is not healthy for you. And that makes you very angry and reactive. That's the reason why the court ordered you to come here to see me. That's why your child is flunking out of school and it's so unresponsive to certain therapies. So we can tell you the why, and we can now provide you with a with a guidance system that combines different interventions. We can, if you need medication, we can a doctor, a medical doctor can tell you what's the best medication for you. If you need, for example, if you need psychotherapy, what's the best form of psychotherapy for your brain? So with the technology, we're getting very specific. We're getting quite specific into what works best for people. And that really changes the landscape for mental health. And that's one of the things I enjoy about this. People have more clarity now. They understand why what they were attempting before was not working for them, and now what can work for them down the road.
We know that dementia caregivers are under tremendous mental and physical stress. Is there a generalized suggestion that you have for the listeners who are living through this now, what they might want to be looking for in like their brain behaviors, for lack of a better term, and what maybe they could do to listen and make changes? I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Now, I want to start by saying that we have now very better algorithms. AI has been bringing a lot of great assistance into our field now, because we can now do something we call the mild cognitive impairment or cognitive impairment prediction index. And that is, I can scan somebody, let's say somebody who's in their 60s or 70s are coming to see us, and they're worried that they're developing Alzheimer's or frontotemporal dementia or any form of neurodegenerative disease. And because their parents had it, and now they're losing their memory, they're quite scared, right? So when we scan your brain, we put this through this algorithm, and this algorithm will give us a 0 to 100 prediction index in the cognitive impairment. Cognitive impairment is the step that precedes Alzheimer's type dementia. Speaking specifically of Alzheimer's. And when you are from 0, when you're below 50%, you're okay. It means that it's likely normal aging, but you need to take good care of yourself. Now, if you go 50 to 60, 60 to 70, or 80% or higher, you have a stronger chance that it's neurodegeneration. The cutoff for normally for us is 65 to 70%, meaning when you are at 65 to 70%, there is still a window of opportunity to prevent and probably reverse the cognitive impairment. But when you're at 80%, it's normally very late. And that means that there's nothing we can do for you at that point. It's just palliative care. Once you start with dementia, the only thing we can hope for is if we start targeting it in the early stages, we can delay the progression. But at a certain point, there's always a window of opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
And the metrics for this algorithm start at age 50. My suggestion is for people who are in their 50s, who are still young, that they go get a brain scan, a brain map, and they get their mild cognitive impairment prediction. Because let's say at 50, you score at 60%. You're young and it's a very high percentage, but you still have time to do things to reverse the process. You eat better, you exercise, you stop drinking alcohol, you start smoking, all the things that we should be doing. And then you get brain training, and there's therapies for that. And then you can reverse the process. So one of the goals that I have now in Singapore and around the world is, because now we have the technology and we have the means for it, is to start doing screenings for the population who's at higher risk. And we're looking into maybe partnering up with Dementia Singapore as a startup to get this ball going. So the first thing that you want to do, especially if you're 50 and over, is to do all the assessments and the testing that you can do to see where you are. Now, this is a frightening process. Nobody wants to hear that they have the chance of, having developing dementia in the future. Nobody wants to hear that they're depressed. Nobody wants to hear that their brain is dysregulated. But you are going to be happy that you did, and you can implement prevention rather than regretting it later when it might be too late for you. So first thing is always do an assessment. You can look up a practitioner in your neck of the woods, get a brain map, and look at your mild cognitive impairment prediction index, and start from there. Now, this goes for both the patient and for the caretaker. Caretakers would benefit from doing biofeedback and neurofeedback in that it mitigates the stress that caretakers experience. Because let's assume the caretaker won't develop dementia, but because you're high stress, you're at risk for many other diseases that are triggered and exacerbated by stress. Your immune response will be lower, your sleep is going to go out the window. And if you have a genetic predisposition to cancer, or you have a genetic predisposition to diabetes, now you will be at higher risk. So for the caretaker, mitigating stress is very, very important. It's always easier said than done, but it can be implemented. And sadly, many times the focus is on the patient, but the focus doesn't shift into the caretaker. And the focus should be for both the patient. What can we do to give this person the best quality of life possible before they pass away? And what can we do for the caretaker while they're taking care of their loved one and after they're gone? Because when you add the bereavement to the already ongoing stress, you are another layer of stress. And by doing neuromodulation techniques and biofeedback techniques, you can really, really mitigate that. And you're going to be better off down the road. It's not going to solve the problem for you, but it's really going to protect you.
That makes sense. Is this neurofeedback, the biofeedback, is that something we need a practitioner for? Do we need somebody to teach it and then we can do it at home? How does that process work?
Well, there's actually two ways you can do it in the present day. One is you can go to a clinic, and you can do a search online for a practitioner in your neck of the woods. I would recommend looking for somebody who's BCIA certified. BCIA is the entity that governs certification, which means you're board certified. Or you can do remote biofeedback and neurofeedback. Many practitioners are doing that today, and there is state-of-the-art equipment that is affordable that you can buy or rent or lease for that purpose. Many practitioners now are doing that, which means you rent the equipment, it's shipped to your home, you get on a Zoom call with the practitioner, they teach you how to turn it on and how to program it. And then using something like TeamViewer or AnyDesk, the clinician can control your computer screen and they can manipulate the software. So all you have to do is sit in front of the computer and train your brain, and it's as if the clinician is there with you. So because of transportation issues or logistic issues, many people cannot afford to go to a clinic, but now we can train you at home. And this is done more and more and more, and it's as efficient as if you're doing it in the clinic. It all depends on the equipment you're using, of course, and it all depends also on the clinician you're working with, which is the most important element. That you're working with somebody with experience, somebody who's board certified, who meets certain educational standards and criteria. So you make sure you're in good hands. Because after all, you need to remember, this is your brain we're working with. And that's no joke.
That's true. I was going to ask about how to make sure you didn't get somebody that, because there's a lot of the longevity and aging well. There's a lot of those quote unquote practitioners out there. And you answered how we can avoid some of the less reputable people. So
Yeah,
that's good to know.
unfortunately, the field is full of gurus out there, TikTok and Instagram and all the social media for all these gurus. So if you go to bcia.org, is where you go, and there's a tab that says find a practitioner, and you can do a zip code search, and it will list all of the practitioners within 20 to 50 miles or 10 miles of where you live, of your zip code, who are board certified. And so, these individuals have gone the um, through the motions of learning how to do this properly. They have gotten mentoring, and they're constantly attending conferences, and they're constantly attending workshops to optimize their skills. So bcia.org is where you want to go to find a reputable, as you say, biofeedback and neurofeedback practitioner.
And
And you can also do it by country. If you're not in the United States, you can search by country as well.
Okay. And I'll make sure that that link is in the show notes. So you can just, when you're done listening, you can just click on it, check it out. I can guarantee you there is probably not one within 10 miles of me, because nothing is within 10 miles of me. But it's 10 miles from here to the freeway. And then that opens up my options. I would probably have to go to Sacramento, which is better than a hit in the head, as my mom used to say. You made the comment about your brain being dysregulated. Is that caused by disease specifically, or trauma, or both, or either or?
Well, that's always $1 million question, and I'm really happy you're asking, because whenever I interpret a brain map for somebody, the first question they ask is, okay, so what caused this? And it's a multifactorial phenomenon, which means it all starts when mom is pregnant with you. If the pregnancy is stressful, rest assured that's going to affect you, because the hormonal changes that the mom experiences will impact the way the brain forms in the baby. So if your mom had a stressful, um, physically or psychologically stressful pregnancy, that's where a lot of the issues start, that this regulation in the brain starts. If your mom was doing drugs, drinking alcohol, or smoking when she was pregnant with you, well, that's a big no-no. Rest assured that's going to create some problems. I want to tell you from personal experience. When I was born being strangled with the umbilical cord. So I was choking on my own umbilical cord. I lost a little bit of oxygen when I was being born. I was not close to death the way they tell me, but I was a little blue because I was losing oxygen. Well, that helped explain when I did my scan years later. That helped explain a lot of the patterns that I saw in my brain map. What happens when you're born? Were you born through regular childbirth, or were you born through a C-section? There's a difference.
Mm-hmm.
If you were born and you lacked oxygen, they had to put you in an incubator. And from that point, from the moment you're born to the moment you come to see me for a brain map, anything that's happened there, car accidents, sexual abuse, you were kidnapped and you survive a natural disaster, you have survived injuries through your sports, you had a toxic marriage, anything in life that has happened between you, the moment you're born and the moment you go do a brain map, has an influence in how your brain interprets that. And the normally the rule of thumb here is, the more unwanted, unpleasant events somebody experiences through their life, the more dysregulated their brain is going to be. Now, some people are quite resilient, and in spite of all the disadvantages they face, they have quite an optimal brain pattern. But that's a very low percentage of the population. So if you've experienced physical trauma, emotional trauma, psychological trauma, if you have struggled with addiction, if you have struggled with a toxic upbringing, anything that has this regulated brain, we can understand it, and we can help you mitigate those symptoms, hopefully eliminate those symptoms, and have a more optimally functional brain, which makes you a happier, more productive individual in society.
So everything in life affects our brain. That doesn't surprise me. What's one of the most interesting things you've seen in a brain map, or what's the most interesting thing a brain map has shown you?
Oh wow, there's a few. I remember there was a gentleman that I worked with many years ago. He came to me because he was the victim of a terrorist attack.
Oh,
So um he was parking there was a car bomb explosion, and he was parking the car with he was this was in a building for a country club. So it was 3 stories above where the car bomb exploded. And where the car bomb went off, the floor caved in, and he fell 3 stories,
ooh.
and he had a sudden deceleration where he hit the side of the head. And he was in a coma for a long time. The doctors at one point didn't know if he was going to make it. And when he came out of the coma, he had to learn to do everything again. He had to learn how to go to the bathroom. He had to learn how to walk, how to speak, how to read, how to write. And when he contacted me, he came because he had become very aggressive as a consequence of the brain injury. So the mom said, "You're a different person. You either get some help or I'm not going to talk to you anymore." That's how bad the situation was. And when we did the brain map, I mean, I had seen brain injuries, but not to the extent he had. For all intents and purposes, this is an individual who the doctors would have said, this is who you're going to be for the rest of your life. But he was a very driven individual. And he said, well, I'm going to show you. First, the doctors told him he would never walk again. And he walked again. They told him he would never be able to speak again. He was able to speak again. And we worked very hard for about 3 years. But today, after that, he went and got an MBA in Harvard.
Oh,
And today he's happily married with children, and he's now running the family business. His dad is retired now. He took over the family company, and the relationship improved greatly. And the family to this day is quite grateful for that. So I think that's one of my most proud success stories with brain mapping and brain training. And I always use this case as an example to show people that if he could do it, anybody can do it. That there shouldn't be any excuses as to why you cannot shift your life for the best. And most recently, go ahead, sorry.
That's a pretty dramatic injury. I mean, falling 3 stories is like about 30 some odd feet, and then your skull hitting whatever he hit. Oh, that sounds.
He hit hard concrete, so it's really a miracle that he was alive, first of all, and now it's truly a miracle that he's now happy and functional again. And after almost passing away and learning how to do everything that a human needs to learn to do, he goes to get an MBA in Harvard, which is a very hard thing to do. And so it's just a testament to how amazing the human brain is. And I want people to understand that if you train your brain, you can really achieve things that you never thought possible. I say there are no boundaries or limits to what you can accomplish if you can really tap into and harness the power of your mind. I've been doing this for 17 years and never gets boring. And it never ceases to amaze me. Every brain map that I do, I learn something absolutely new. And it's a fascinating window into the universe that each individual is. So, I recently did see a case that a colleague of mine from India sent me about a guy who had a car accident. And after the car accident, when I looked at the EEG patterns, so looking at the brainwaves, and there's a pattern that I had never seen before. Because of my training, I knew this is a real thing. It was a noise in the signal. It wasn't because of movement. It wasn't because of an electrical interference. And I said, I'm going to send this to my mentor. My mentor has seen over a million EEGs. His name is Jay Gunkelman. If anybody wants to look him up, I call him the Einstein of the brain. What Einstein's was to physics, Jay Gunkelman is to neuroscience. And I sent it to him. He says, I've never seen this before, but this looks like a conversion disorder. Meaning because of the accident, now we're seeing a new brainwave pattern for the very first time, at least for me, the very first time, which shows that we have not seen everything there is to see about the brain. But the point is, we looked at the pattern, we decided how we're going to target that. And then I suggest the protocols for the intervention for the practitioner. But it's just to show, I love doing this because every time I see a brain map, I learn something new. And this is a very, very interesting case. So now I use it as a little bit of a bragging right, because I can see this pattern that, nobody's ever seen before. And when I show the pattern, people go, what is that? Is that real? And I go, yes, it is very real. Just to show that every time you do a brain map, when you think you've seen it all, you're going to get surprised. And I love it because it's quite a humbling experience. It really keeps you humble, and it keeps you human, so you can really connect and understand people.
It's interesting. I've talked to neurologists about, my mom was in a car accident at, I think she was 49, and she hit her face so hard on the steering wheel that she damaged the nerve that goes through your cheek. And she started showing signs that are much easier to recognize looking backwards at about 52, 53 years old. And I asked a neurologist once if he thought the car accident could have triggered the early onset Alzheimer's. And he said, oh, absolutely. And had she known that that was an issue, she could have done the lifestyle interventions that we're aware of. And it sounds like she could have and should have seen you. Of course, this was December of 91, so you weren't even practicing that.
Yeah, I was in high school then.
Well, my daughter was a month old and she's now 34, so time flies. But it's just interesting because I know that traumatic brain injuries, like your car bombing gentleman, can be a trigger for some form of dementia. Is that something he still needs to worry about, or did this brain mapping and the neurofeedback and all that like fix his brain?
Well, I wouldn't frame it as he needs to worry about, but what I suggest to him is that he gets an annually MRI and he does an annual checkup with the brain mapping, uh, because that's, that predisposes him to this and many other things down the road. It doesn't mean he's going to do it, but prevention is key. And just like everybody does, or everybody should do an annually medical checkup, we should do an annually um, brain map scan to check for things. Imagine if we had this in nursing homes, or if we did this early in life. Let's talk about school settings, for example. You have a school where you can do a baseline scan, a baseline brain map for every student you have at that school. And all of a sudden, one of the students or a group of students starts struggling with the academics. Well, if you do a second brain scan, you have the baseline to compare to, and now we know why. Is it because they're not sleeping well? Is it because they are doing drugs and we didn't know it? Right? Is it because they are developing some metabolic disorder and we didn't know it? I mean, when we look at the brain, we can tell you about these things. We can see if your metabolics are whack, and then we refer you to a nutritionist to do a full metabolic panel. We can see if you are developing symptoms because you're smoking pot. I mean, I've had young people come to my office and without knowing anything, I tell them, if I were you, I would stop smoking pot. And the eyes open up like a deer looking in the headlights, and they go, how do you know that? I'm like, your brain is telling me. So I go, the reason why you're feeling stupid because they tell me, oh, I'm slow, I'm stupid, I'm not learning anything. I'm like, well, it's all the pot you're smoking, man. You really have to cut it down if you don't want to slow your brain. So it points to the marijuana not being as harmless as we make it out to be, right? Chronic usage can be very dangerous. So to that point, if we scan a student, if we take this to a nursing home and we scan the population, we can start predicting early on. And this is a game changer because we can literally save lives before it's too late, Now, what's important to understand, especially when it comes to dementia, is that now we know more and more that dementia starts when you're in your 30s and your 40s. You don't show the symptoms until later on, right? So for your mom, it was probably early 60s, early 70s, right? Or maybe, but now we're seeing signs of early onset dementia. I mean, we're seeing people in their mid 40s with symptoms of dementia. This is very frightening, but it starts very early on. It starts when you're going out partying and drinking a lot of alcohol. It starts when you're a child and you really indulge in your sugars and your candy, So everything we do in life will have a repercussion later in life. And so what it's important for people to understand is if you're very scared that you could develop dementia or any other mental illness down the road, you need to start taking care of yourself now.
Mm-hmm.
And the number one advice I would tell people is two things: work on your sleep and stop drinking alcohol, because there's nothing positive, there's nothing good health wise, especially brain health wise, that comes out of drinking alcohol.
Yeah, that's not a
Number one.
popular suggestion to. I tell people there's not a safe amount of alcohol on an aging brain. I have never been a drinker really. The stuff that I like is full of sugar and full of calories, and having to have battled my weight for my entire adult life, and keeping in mind that my dad's side of the family has a ton of type 2 diabetes, it's just like I am not drinking calories. That's my choice. All I drink is water and tea. Very boring. Bring my own tea with me to parties because I'm fussy. But yeah, that's not a popular opinion. I was
That's a very unpopular opinion,
yeah.
but it's the reality. It's the reality is backed up by the science and the research, and more. And there's a very strong correlation between alcohol consumption and cancer, and alcohol consumption and dementia. Uh, frontotemporal, cardiovascular, cerebrovascular, Alzheimer's, you name. So when people tell me what can I do, and I tell them don't drink, they look at me like I'm, you know, essentially giving them a death sentence. But I go, well, I mean, what do you want me to tell you? It is what it is, right? So prevention is key, and it's very important for people to understand that if you're concerned about a loved one, you better start making changes now. And if you're concerned about yourself, you better start making changes now. One of the other interesting things we've been noticing in terms of cognitive impairment is COVID-19.
Mm-hmm.
And the rates for cognitive impairment have spiked heavily after the pandemic. So now we're seeing more and more the inflammatory capabilities that the virus can inflict, not only in the body but also in the brain. I did some scans of people before the pandemic, and their MCI was at 17%, 12%, 13%, very healthy brains. And after they got COVID, I did a scan again, and it jumped to 40%, 50%. So it doesn't mean that they're going to get it, but the level of inflammation that the virus can cause in the body it's there. It's not a joke. It's not a conspiracy. It is a real thing, you know? So if my other advice is, if you have had COVID-19 at least once, more than once, and your symptoms were very severe, you need to get yourself to a neurologist, do a brain map, do an MRI, check your health. It's very important that you do so. And if you had COVID more than once, if your symptoms have been very severe, you need to start getting on the wagon with the drinking and your healthy eating and your sleep and everything in between. It's very hard to do. I'm not going to sit here and tell people it's an easy thing to do. It's very hard to do, but you have to wait, whether you want to become ill in the future or you want to live a long and healthy life.
Fortunately, I only had COVID once, and the symptoms weren't severe. I lost my voice for 3 weeks. That was horrifying. But for the most part, I just felt run down. I didn't feel really badly. The only time I've had really significant like brain fog was when I had shingles. That was nasty. We're not doing that again. Which reminds me, I'm on the kick to fix all of the physical things that affect my daily life, like my rusty knees and the tendonitis in my wrist, which requires going to a neurologist, which is interesting. I have to get a nerve conduction study. But I need to get the shingles vaccine because we're not doing that again. And there's evidence that it helps protect your brain from dementia. So that's good to know. So my regular listeners know what the preventions are, what we need to do to improve our sleep and all that good stuff, which if you're caring for somebody with dementia, your sleep might get wrecked because their circadian rhythm gets all out of whack. I'm in the camp of it's okay to try to gently redirect their circadian rhythm into a more, typical, normal, whatever you want to call it, rhythm. You may not be 100% successful, but, allowing them to be awake until 1 o'clock in the morning, which means you're awake and and then you have to deal with the world, which means you have to be up earlier than they would. I don't think that's healthy. And so I think if you try to shift them a little bit, not too forcefully, I think that's fine. For those people who are interested in this, but maybe not quite ready to pull the trigger, what is a couple of the ways that we can help reduce like the stress we feel on those days when our loved one has asked us the same question 75 times and we're not sure if we want to bang our head on the wall or punch them. So, and we don't do either. So our stress rises. How can, I know about breathing. I work on breath work all during my workout. So what other tricks should we be doing that helps kind of calm our brain down a little bit?
Well, more than breath work, because breath work it's sort of a broad category. I would focus on something called heart rate variability biofeedback, which is the foundation for heart rate variability biofeedback is breath work, but it's more than that. It brings the connection between your breath work and your cognition, which means you learn to breathe in with specific patterns that you combine with your thinking patterns, meaning bringing intention, bringing appreciation. And that creates something we will call a resonant pattern, which means there is a connection between mind, body, and spirit, if you will, depending on what you want to believe in. But we call it mind, body, and spirit. That brings about cascade of positive effects for you. Your cortisol levels are lower, your immune system gets a stronger response, your sleep gets better, there's specific brain regions which now respond better, meaning you're not as short-tempered, impatient. You become more understanding and more compassionate toward that relative who's asking you that question for the 75th time. So heart rate variability is very important. And here's the kicker. You don't have to practice for hours and hours and hours. 15 minutes of practice in the morning, 15 minutes of practice in the afternoon seem to do the trick. If people want to go for a little longer, that's fun. But all you need is 15 minutes, 30 minutes in the day, spread into two 15-minute practices. And if you do this consistently, you're going to notice a difference. It's not that you're not going to get unnerved when your relative asks you the same thing over and over, but you're going to react in a different way. You're not going to secrete as much cortisol. You're not going to lose your patience much. You're going to be more understanding of the person, and you're going to start coming up with ways of dealing with that more successfully. Meaning you don't have to have the same reactivity. It really mitigates your stress to the point you're protecting yourself. So heart rate variability, it's something that you can learn with a practitioner remote. They can show you what wearables you can buy, and they're very accessible, $200, $250, and you can practice with those at home, with your phone, with your computer, with a tablet, however you want to. But the important thing is that you get that in going. And the other one that you mentioned is your exercise. I believe that caretakers need to find the time to exercise. Okay. And it's not that they don't have the time, it's just that they don't seem to want to have the time because they're tired.
Yeah.
The only way you can counter fatigue is through movement. It's sort of counterintuitive, but when you feel lazy, the last thing you want to do is go out for a walk. But the moment you go out for a walk, you feel better. You may, in the first few minutes, you may not feel like it, and you're thinking this is a waste of my time. I should be laying in bed watching television. But as the minutes go, you notice there's a difference. So an exercise regime based on your age, your fitness level, it's what you really need to do. Because exercise by far is the best medicine. By far. For stress, for anxiety, to optimize your sleep. It's not the only intervention, but it's one of the most powerful interventions. And finding 30 minutes to do cardio, go for a run, go for a walk, sprint and scream to release the stress, anything that you can find to help you, it's optimal. And, people tell me all the time, I don't have time for exercise. And when they tell me that, the first thing I tell them is, okay, give me your phone. And they go, why? And I go, because I'm sure if I look at your browsing history, I'm sure you're gonna fit time for exercise. You could fit time for exercise there.
Oh, that screen time record is kind of cruel.
It is. So they go, oh, well, you know, some people go, you were right. Some people never come back and see me again. Some people think about it and then they do it. Human nature is it's complex and interesting. But the point is, you have to make the time if you want to feel better. Okay. So the heart rate variability is it's a very important thing. There are other interventions that I like. For example, there is this technology called audio visual entrainment, and it's a light and sound technology that people can buy and use at home. So I will provide you with some links where people can go look for these products, because I don't want to sound like we're doing product placement here, but light and sound machines, I use mine, and it's light and sound, which is it fires at a specific frequency. You have flickering lights and binaural beats. You wear the headphones, you wear the goggles. It's very relaxing. It induces endorphins. It reduces stress. So you can use it at home. You can use it on the airplane. You can use it while taking a ride on the bus or the train. Um, there's no excuse. All you have to do is sit there for 15, 20 minutes and use it. I use mine for my sleep. I use it because I travel frequently across time zones. I use it when I'm on the plane. It helps me sleep better. It helps me counter jet lag. It helps me recover more easily. So audiovisual entrainment is a wonderful technology, and it can be used at home. So while your loved one is taking a nap, you can put it on for 50 minutes and refresh and recover. So there are more and more things like that. There's another one called transcranial direct current stimulation, which is a form of electrical stimulation. I don't suggest that one so much because you need a therapist, a trained professional to help you with that. But the audiovisual entrainment or the cranial electrostimulation work perfectly. And again, these are equipment that you can buy for maybe $300, $350. It's not and it's not very cheap, but it's also not very expensive, and it's very cost efficient. So those are the things that I, off the top of my head, really suggest for people, because they're easy to implement. They don't require hours, because I know caretakers can be very busy, very stressed, but these things don't require hours, and you can fit them into your schedule for better self-care. The caretakers need to work on their self-care.
Yeah. I have a perfect example of being really tired and having exercise improve your fatigue level. So I traveled across the country to a conference, and the best way to get from California back east and not go through the Denver airport, anybody that's gone through Denver that hasn't gotten stuck, let me know. I'd love to talk to you. Every time I've been in the Denver airport, flying through, trying to get out, always get stuck for a longer period of time than it would take to get to my next destination. So I tell the travel agent, do not fly me through Denver, which means I have to take a red eye to get back east. So I get back to New Jersey. It is 9 o'clock in the morning when I get to the hotel. Now I did nap-ish on the plane, but it's a 5-hour flight. So no matter how much you sleep, it's not enough. And I had a nice breakfast and was scrolling on my phone in the lobby. There wasn't really a couch where I could like recline enough to rest. And I chastised myself and I said, I didn't fly across the country to waste half the day on my phone. So I walked up to Princeton University, beautiful campus, get very old buildings, got some really modern ones, which was surprising. But I basically walked up there and walked back. It was a 3-hour walk. I was much more energized after that walk than I felt when I was sitting in the lobby. And it's like I knew that was the case, but it's just like when you experience it, you're like, oh, this really does help. So I hope that helps motivate people. A lot of my listeners know that I am a Peloton member. I joke that I belong to the cult of Peloton because I do talk about it probably more than I should. It's like hint, hint. The endorsement would be nice, guys. But they have 15-minute classes. You can do a low impact 15-minute cycling, and you don't have to have their fancy bike. You can do it with any of them. you can find a lot of Peloton bikes on Facebook Marketplace that are pretty cheap. So, if you got a few extra bucks, which I know a lot of us don't, it's not a bad option. But, there's a lot of options, and I'm always surprised. I listen to different length podcasts when I'm doing chores and things, and I'm always surprised. It's like, it's been 12 minutes already. Wow, that was a 12-minute episode. And wow, that was fast. You'd be surprised how fast time flies. So you gotta kind of manage your schedule well enough to fit these little 15-minute increments of brain health, self-care into your schedule. And you'll definitely feel the difference and be appreciative that you do that. And I would love the links to these other products because I'm always curious. My listeners know my mom had Alzheimer's disease, my maternal grandmother had vascular dementia, and my maternal great grandmother also had some form of dementia. So daily brain health self-care is always a part of my life. It will always be a part of my life because I'm not going the way they went. So is there a last minute suggestion that you have for the listeners, how they can take advantage of brain mapping or something they should think about doing to help keep their cognitive health as good as possible?
Yeah, absolutely. One more neuromodulation technique that I would like to mention is it's called photobiomodulation.
Okay.
And photomodulation, it's a form of red light therapy that has incredible benefits for the brain. I collaborate with this group in South Korea, and they have developed this photobiomodulation instrument, and they have been doing a lot of research on hospitals in South Korea for dementia, where more for cognitive impairment, where they've been able to show that they can reverse when there's a window of time. Oh, photobiomodulation is also one of those techniques that you can use at home. It normally involves wearing a helmet. It's shaped like a bicycle. Helmet is very comfortable and you can put it on. But the most important thing is that if you can have it be brain map qEEG. qEEG is quantitative electroencephalography. That's the technical name for the brain map. So if it can be qEEG guided, even better. And again, you can use it from the comfort of your home. And again, I will provide you with a link to some reputable companies that I would suggest people can buy from, and you can provide it with a promo code so that they can get a discount on this. But photobiomodulation works very well. It works very well for dementia prevention. It works very well for the reversing of the cognitive impairment. It works very well on reducing neuroinflammation in the brain, which means it optimizes your memory, it optimizes your focus, it optimizes your sleep, it optimizes your energy. It helps you think with more clarity. It works very well for people with migraines. It works very well for people who experience brain fog. We've been using it with long-term COVID sufferers, and we're getting some very positive results in that when nothing else has worked for them, the photobiomodulation has reversed the long-term symptoms, at least from the brain perspective, on about 70 to 80% of this population. So photobiomodulation is also something that you can buy and use at home. You just have to make sure that you're buying the right equipment. Again, there's a lot of products out there, and all of them promise you, take you to the promised land.
Yeah.
You need to know which ones are reliable and which ones have the research behind them. And you most importantly need to work with ethical companies, because a lot of these products are made by people who just want to make money. They're just profit driven. They're not really driven by the desire to help people. They're driven by the desire to earn a lot of money. And that's not, in my book, that's not the right way to do it.
Now, make money helping people is good, but you got to do the helping people most.
Yeah.
That
You
has
need to have a genuine interest in helping people. And that's what my career is about. And that's why I recommend the products that I'll provide links for. So you can put them at the end of the episode.
That's wonderful. Well, your website is also linked in the show notes. So just a quick reminder to the listeners, if you scroll down under the player in whatever podcast app you're listening to, It's a hot link, just like any other hot link you're used to, and it'll take you right to his website. There's a bunch of hot links in the show notes, so check them all out. And I will include all these links that you're going to send me so that people can check out what we've been talking about. And I know somebody that's had COVID at least 3 times, and he does suffer significantly from long COVID. So I'll have to send him at least the end of this so that he might, see if this so it's the photobiomodulation.
Correct.
Oh, yay. See if that helps him because, he got vaccinated and all that stuff, but, in his early 30s with, doing all the pre-wedding stuff that, young people do, that makes me sound old. Um, he just ended up with it multiple times, and it's not been good for his life. So I appreciate all this advice. I find this kind of conversation absolutely fascinating because I'm convinced that the final frontier of exploration is not space, it is our brains.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I'm very happy and I appreciate you opening the space for me to talk about this and share some of my limited knowledge with the audience. But hopefully it will spark some interest and people will seek somebody who can help them.
Well, I appreciate it and thank you so much.
Thank you.